So David Hochman, welcome to Right About Now podcast again, a two-timer.
Happy to be here. This is exciting.
Pandemic I love it.
Is ending. We're happy.
Pandemic is ending, and yet we're still not seeing each other in person. But that's coming. I'm so glad you're doing this show and this particular topic. It's one that I think about a lot. People ask me a lot. You know, how do you have any hacks for making writing just a little bit easier and more manageable? And they seem to offer hacks in every other facet of life. Why do writers not have hacks? And I think part of my hesitancy to even do this episode was that, we both know that writing is a very difficult, laborious, sometimes often painful, sometimes enjoyable experience. And that to write, you actually have to write. Like there's no way around writing. Like you actually have to do it unless you have AI writing for you. Yes. So, the good writers don't always take shortcuts. They do the work. But at the same time, the good writers also maybe over the years have developed techniques, routines, systems that make writing more manageable and a bit more efficient, I think. And that's what I want to talk to you about. No shortcuts here, but just ways to make writing more pleasant. And there is nobody better really to talk about this than David Hochman. You have been writing for so many years. You're one of probably the most prolific freelance writer that I've ever known. What are you up to these days? I mean, we haven't talked in 2 years. So you have this, and I mentioned this in the introduction. By the way, I'm going to do an introduction. So I mentioned this in the introduction, but tell us a little bit, bring me up to speed about where you are in your career and your writing, who you're writing for these days and that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. It's just an explosion of different things, right? So I've never wanted to be pigeonholed as one kind of writer. So this year just exemplified it because I had nothing else to do except for work and play tennis. So that was it. I decided to do a million different things. So there's like a book writing section. There's a ghost writing section. There's a straight up media section where I do some journalism still for places that are still existing.
That still pay that pay more than 10 cents a word. Yeah.
There's the kind of branding work where I'm working with companies to tell their stories, which I actually enjoy doing.
Yeah.
And there's this UPOD world that I run, which is like a kind of school for freelance superheroes. And we just talk about how to do all this together, like how to be a better writer, how to make more money, how to do as much as you can and have an interesting, satisfying writing life. What else is there? I do travel writing. I do food writing. I do helping people create their messages. So there's not one thing that I do. It's too hard to do just one thing.
And it's always been like that for you, but you've had to pivot as many have, including me, and, diversified your offerings. I mean, there was probably a time when you were making a living just writing for magazines, right? And newspapers.
Yep.
But you've been smart about evolving and having a lot of different streams of income. And I like that you've wandered over into the brand side of things. That's really smart.
And by the way, a lot of people who were formerly my employers and editors are now in the brand world. So it just feels like an extension of that because people, it's like that follow the money thing. So I followed those editors and they're now running different agencies and things like that.
That's why it's so important to not burn bridges. I tell people that all the time, because those editors that you worked with, back in the days of when you were writing for magazines are now, like you said, working for brands. But you had good relationships with them, so they call you. And so very important to be a writer that people enjoy working with and trust.
And to try to just be efficient and to get stuff done so that you're not going to waste your time. You're not going to waste their time. You're going to try to limit the drama in any project to just get it done quickly and cleanly, which is why, Hack is almost my name. I mean, it's Hawk.
It is. You are. I know. I was like, this is David Hochman.
Exactly.
I love it. You're perfect.
We are what what we're called. So
yes,
John, you're a big man.
I'm a big man, but when I worked at Child Magazine, they did an article about how, people whose names match their where they work, and I was working at Child Magazine. It kind of made sense when I was. But anyway, but yes, I'm a large man. So let's talk about hacks though, because you write a lot during the, there's still, you just writing for, it's probably more. Are you writing more now than you've ever written in your career, or are you doing a lot more managerial kind of stuff too?
No, I'm doing a lot. I'm doing bigger projects, so it's like it's not as much of a crazy flurry. So there'll be things that will last for months instead of days, which I like. But it's still a lot of words and brain power, and
right.
I have to do something every day. There's something to be done every day, and then there's like 4 people saying, "Did you get that? Are you done with that?"
Right. All right. So, Mr. Hochman.
Yes.
Let's talk about hacks, and I'm gonna offer some of mine too, and my insights and maybe commentary on yours. I'm sure you're gonna teach me a lot today. So I've got a pen and paper ready, because this is as much for me as it is for my listeners.
Okay.
So what number one hack from David Hochman, aka David Hochman.
Mm-hmm. Number one hack is set a timer, because if you set a timer for an hour and 40 minutes, hey Siri, set timer for an hour and 40 minutes. It usually works.
Siri didn't listen to you this time.
You can get a lot done in that focused time, right? So if you could tell a story at a party, you could write that thing. If you could tell a story in 15 minutes at a party, it shouldn't be that long. But if you can tell a story in 5 minutes at a party, you can write the thing in an hour and 40 minutes. So that's one. And more specifically, if I'm really busy, if it's a really busy week, I will use the Pomodoro technique, which is you choose a task, you set a timer for 25 minutes, you work on the task until the timer beeps, you take a short break of 3 to 5 minutes, and then you repeat the cycle. And then,
right. Do you find that now when you're doing that task?
Yeah.
First of all, let's talk about the hour and 45 minutes. Mm-hmm. Why that time? Is that a time limit that's arbitrary, or is that one that you've actually found?
It's actually an hour and 40 minutes, because an hour and 45 sounds too like it was like when I want to meet people and I want to make sure they're on time, I'll say, can we meet at 5 minutes to 12? And they're always on time. But if you just say, can we meet at around noon? No, they won't be on time. So
that's a good hack, by the way. I didn't know that hack. That's how you get. Oh, so that worked.
That's how you. So I'll be like, and when I'm requesting time with people who are really busy, I will say, this won't take more than 12 minutes, and that gets people to say yes to interviews. It sounds like I'm going to be incredibly efficient, which I am, and I try to keep them to 12 minutes.
That's a great idea. So instead of saying 10 minutes, which is kind of like that's like why we don't in magazines do top 10, because it's kind of generic, right? And it always sounds somehow pat, and we do 11, but 12 sounds very, very, like that's very specific.
Yeah.
I love that. All right. So an hour and 40 minutes as opposed to an hour 45, which sounds more like,
you're not going to follow. You're not going to. It's like TED Talks are 18 minutes, right? I mean, they're 18 minutes, and I feel like there's a reason for that. Like, it makes people listen to them, because if they say they're 20 minutes long, people think it's an hour.
Yeah. By the way, this podcast is 28 minutes. I don't know. I don't know what. I've never actually found the perfect formula for a podcast. Like, that's a whole other conversation. So an hour and 40 minutes, is there also like, do you find that in that hour and 40 minutes, you are able to be creative without kind of needing to use the bathroom, or just burning out a little bit, or just like you're able to get enough done within that time frame to make it a good use of time?
And that it's going to end, and you're going to be able to eat afterwards, or go outside, or have a day.
It's not terrifying.
And I feel like 2 sessions of an hour and 40 minutes in one day is like a glorious amount of work time.
That really is. Focus.
2 hour and 40 minute sessions is like, it beats working for 14 hours on something, even if you end up having to stretch it and do other things. But like, I don't know. I just find that I get stuff. If I really need to get stuff done, and I'm like, it shuts everything out. I'm not on social media. I'm not doing anything else. I'm not looking at email. I'm just doing that. And that's significant. It's like,
so this is very important, that you're not working for an hour and 40 minutes with your email browser on and your social media lit. You are focused. This is focused time to write. And the problem sometimes it's tricky, because sometimes in that hour and 40 minutes, you realize you have to do a little research, and you go online, and then all of a sudden I found myself, I have to go online to look at something, And then I'm like, oh, Facebook or whatever, I see, I'm lured away because I'm all suddenly in the internet world. What do you do about that?
About getting lost in social media?
Well, about being like, if you have to use the internet during your hour and 40-minute devoted time, do you just tell yourself, I'm allowed to go on this site to look up this quote, but I am not going to go and then bounce around on Washington Post or whatever, or the New York Times, looking at all the related stories, and you get sidetracked. It's very easy to get sidetracked on the internet.
It's the same thing that I do. I'm very, very good at this, and I don't know if everyone who's listening is good at this, but I feel like it's a weird superpower that I have, which is I can go into a supermarket and buy just what's on the list. I will not get anything that's not on the list. And my wife can't do it, and my kids certainly can't do it. They will spend like $174 extra, but I will get like just that thing.
Yeah.
I can go in and get just one thing.
That's amazing. I don't know if I can do that, especially if I'm hungry.
Yeah, I know. But I feel like that is training for freelancing. When I do that, I always think like, this is my efficiency training when I'm doing this. This is my not being distracted by the rest of the internet and the rest of the things that I have to do. So yeah, it's just that mindset. Like when I know the clock is running, and I know it's running now at 28 minutes, that,
where are we now?
We have stuff to get done.
Yeah, where are we now? We're 12 minutes in.
Oh, wow.
So we got it. Yeah, we're good. All right. So so let's get to the next hack. So I love that hack. This is already the start of an exciting hackathon. What else do you do that helps you? And by the way, okay, I don't want to totally jump off the hour and 40 minutes. How many hour and 40 minutes do you think you can give a day? Like, do you think it's possible? Are you happy? You said if you get 2, it's been a good day.
2 is good. 3 is like almost you're in crisis. You're managing crisis, but 2 is really the most that I can expect. Okay. 1 is good. 1, I get a lot done. You can get a lot done in that time.
You really can.
Yeah.
Okay. What else do you got?
Well, let's see. LinkedIn is boring, but I find that there's a lot of ways to use it in interesting ways. So you find the most interesting people that you know, and you look and see who their friends are. But I just find at companies, you can kind of, if you go to the people section of LinkedIn at any media company, you can see who's doing what, who's associated with it, that's not maybe on the masthead of a place or not officially working for a company. They might just have it on their resume. And I find that's a really interesting way to just see who's where and who's currently at that place. I know people don't think about LinkedIn sometimes to do this, but you can see who's just like second or third below the top, because those are the people that really are making the decisions. And that's where the sweet spot is in terms of getting regular work, finding that second and third.
Okay, so that's a hack for finding more work. That if you're interested in writing, let's say for for Vox, to go and look at the LinkedIn and look at all the positions, and that's interesting because I've never done that. So you would not go for the editor-in-chief of Vox, because that person probably doesn't assign stories or have anything to do with content. In that capacity, you would look at somebody who's like 2 tiers down, right? Who's like editorial manager or whatever.
Or someone who's doing something very specific, like if there's a vertical within Vox that is just about relationships, that person, you can kind of I just find that it's probably the easiest way, and it's an under the radar way to do it, because LinkedIn is the one that's organizing this, and you just click the people tab and it organizes it according to company.
Yeah.
And then you just see, ooh, this is cool. Like maybe there's somebody I know or somebody who knows somebody I know who can connect me with that person. And it just is a back entrance to the behind the curtain world.
I like that. Mm-hmm. Once you identify who this person is, do you tend to do those kind of private messages within the LinkedIn infrastructure?
I never use private messaging within LinkedIn because I hate getting LinkedIn messages. I always feel like they're from somebody who is sending it to 10,000 people.
Yes, exactly.
So what I use either hunter.io. I don't know if you know that thing.
No, hunter.io. Okay.
So it's a great hack because it gives you the email formats for free at every different, at a million different companies. So it tells you, like, is it first dot last name? Is it, it shows you that. And then Rocket Reach is the greatest resource that was ever created.
What is that? I don't even know what it is. This is incredible. Okay.
Rocket Reach gives you Gmails and like Hotmails and AOL, like it gives you people's private emails. Okay. Now it can get expensive, but there's ways around it. So all you have to do is create a Gmail account and you can get 5 to 10 more tokens for it. But you never have to pay for it. All you have to do is
you just keep on creating new email addresses.
But it's an incredible resource. So for UPOD, I'd like to invite these incredible writers to come and speak to us, like Wesley Morris and all these Pulitzer Prize winning people. I find their information on Rocket Reach, and it goes directly to them. And it's usually not their New York Times address. It's often their Gmail address, which I feel like they feel like you must have gotten from a friend or something. Anyway,
yeah, that's great. That's a great hack. Yeah. I'm constantly looking for experts, and I find people of a certain age, I can reach out to them on social media, like Twitter, if they're following me, and they will get back to me. But they have to be like under 30, otherwise they never will. And Facebook, I never reach out to people on Facebook that way that I don't know, or try to. That would be something that I wouldn't do. A hack not to do is start to friend people on Facebook that you don't know, that you just want to have as an expert in your universe.
Mm-hmm.
What do you do so you spend a lot of time interviewing people, I imagine. We all do. What is your hack for transcribing, or do you transcribe, or do you, as you talk to somebody, do you type? Are you a fast typer? Like how do you deal with that?
I mean, Temi.com is everything. I mean, Temi and Rev, those are two almost free transcription services that if you have a clear recording, it will get back to you in probably less than 3 minutes. You can get a full transcript. So I love those. I have a transcriber called CLK Transcription Services.
I've used her. She's great.
And she has been my lifeline for so many things. If I need a very clear transcription, Carol Lee. But it's really Rev and Temi and Otter. That's another one that are.
I use a service called Descript. I mean, they're all pretty much the same. I do find, though, for me, I need some as a very, very clear transcript because I reprint the transcripts on my oftentimes, as a story, say for an article Q&A, or for a podcast post. And I do find that it requires you to go through it with a pretty iron. It's not the best. I mean, it's okay for when you're getting quotes for stories, but when you're actually reprinting the entire transcript on a story, it's not the best.
But here's my hack. And I just did a book where I was interviewing somebody, and we did many long interviews, and the hack is you play it at 2 times at double speed. And so you listen to it at double speed, and the same goes for YouTube. You can adjust the speed to double speed. So if there's any YouTube video you want to watch for an instructional thing, I listen to it at double speed.
Yeah.
And so it's incredible. It's like so satisfying, because even this sort of annoying person that I was working with, listening to it at double speed makes it like it goes by twice as fast, and you get it all, and you can make those corrections very quickly.
That's a great hack. I listen to audiobooks on double speed when I have to interview authors, and I feel like I need to at least know what their book is about. I do that. I listen to it on double speed, sometimes even triple speed as I take a walk. So yeah, I'm totally with you on the double speed thing.
I also have a kind of in real life double speed technique, which is if somebody's a big talker, like I interviewed Oprah, and I had 100 questions that I had ready to go, and she just speaks in these long orations, and you can't interrupt. Wow. Brilliant. I love her. But she just would not let me get a word in. So my hack in those situations is to say, okay, so I know your time is so precious, and I'm thrilled to be here, but we're going to just do a final speed round now. And then that gets you a chance. So I'm looking for quick answers. These are quick questions, quick responses. Let's do it. You make a game show, you gamify it. And that.
Did it work with Oprah?
Yes, it did.
That's amazing. She's very verbose. I did not, I mean, I guess you would imagine that, but that's really, that's a great trick. As far as outlining, you know, every story, I mean, the blank page is in any is always, to me, just a sort of terrifying scenario where you have this story and you're staring at your screen and the flashing, and you're just like, okay, I got to start this thing. Do you have any hacks for just getting going?
I mean, the only hack I have is, I mean, there's two things. One is when I first started working, I went to Amsterdam to interview John Bon Jovi, and I couldn't. We spent 3 days together, and I could not think of what of these many experiences was going to be the opening thing.
Yeah.
And I was sitting in the back of the plane, and a writer from Rolling Stone named David Frick who was sitting in front in first class, walked to the back of the plane, and he saw me, and we were working in the same office at Wenner Media. And he looked at my screen, and it was blank with that blinking cursor, and he was like, "You're going to have to do better than that."
Yeah.
And I just thought, like, that scared me. And I always think about that. I'm like, just begin. It's like, just get something going. This is not like, there's no such thing as writer's block. You just have to get something going.
Right.
You can always come back and fix it. So just begin. And just beginning gets it started. So ever since then, I just feel like, I hear his voice saying, like, you got to do better than that. And then I just like throw something down the page.
Do you ever start in the middle of a story, or do you tend to always start at the beginning? Like you start with your lead?
I do start at the beginning.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I've talked to writers. I mean, I think maybe if you're a novelist, it's different. Like some people just want to write certain chapters before they even write the first chapter. But I don't know if it's the way we've been trained, but I'm very linear in my thinking with stories. And it has to be beginning to end for me. One hack, and this is not so much of a hack, it's just a bit of advice that I want to give younger starting out writers, is the importance of the lead. And I don't know if you've noticed this, but I feel like the lead has kind of disappeared in recent, like people don't write leads anymore. They usually start stories in the second paragraph. They start stories with the kind of boring, you know, here's the summary, the nut graph, as we call it. Like here's what the story is going to be about, or here's the who, why, what, when of the story. But they don't drag you in either with a good sentence or with a great anecdote or whatever, a question, whatever it is that you use. And I feel like to me, that separates experienced writers from hacks, even though we're talking about hacks. People who are not experienced and who don't really know how to write yet, or just unformed as writers. And it's always kind of a taste test for me as an editor. I'm like, oh, okay, this person doesn't really understand how to write a lead. And it's like, I've been a lost art form. I've thought about doing a whole podcast about leads, but do you find that as well? Maybe I'm just off base here or maybe I'm being too tough on my fellow writers.
I do think things have changed, and I think attention has shifted, and people want to get to the point. And there's not, in most cases, there's not the time there's not the same time to read long leads that we had before. So in some situations it makes sense, but I love, I work a lot at AARP's magazine, and Bob Love is the editor, and he always says, like, just get to the point. I don't want the wind up. Just get right to the point. And that you could still write brilliantly and still get to the point. So sometimes I think like, I think about like what I might have had and then slash that in my mind and go right to the second part. So sometimes it's about like getting to the most exciting, like you open on the most exciting moment, or you get right to where you think that lead would have taken you. So I've been thinking about that more in the last couple of years, and it's brought some more energy to my writing, which I think is cool.
Yeah, I often, sometimes after I write a story, I'll be like, well, what was the most interesting thing in the story? And then I put it at the front. Or is there a mystery? Like, is there a sense that I can start off that sort of like asks a question or sets up a mystery that people want to have an answer to, right? I think that's kind of a good technique because it makes people want to keep reading. Like, don't give it all away in the first few sentences, which is kind of, I guess, what I'm talking about. Sometimes people kind of give it away too quickly. Like, not that it's a subtle thing. It's not that you want people to be like, I'm not going to read this because the guy's not getting to the point quick enough, but you just kind of want to know, why am I reading this story? Is there a reason that I'm reading this story? Yeah, don't back. I think somebody once said to me, and it might be just an old expression, like you backed in, you're backing into the story, like start on forward, not backing up. So like by the fourth paragraph, like, oh, that's the point of this story.
It's interesting when you read New Yorker stories. They don't have they don't have leads that are fancy often. So many times in a New Yorker story, it'll begin on February
exactly
3rd last year. This thing happened. I'm
and
like over and over again.
Yeah, I know. And sometimes that lead will go on for almost 2 pages, like they never get to. So that's almost like a whole different type of writing, right. Long form journalism. It's different than what we find on the internet, and so I guess writing has changed because the formats have changed and the platforms have changed. Okay, anything that what do you do about copy editing? I am personally not a great copy editor. So I wonder with you, do you copy edit yourself? Do you use a program like Grammarly to copy edit?
This is one of those things where it is a natural obsession for me, and I don't think about it. So it's just part of who I am, and it is usually pretty neat. And if it's not, I feel like it'll be corrected with the autocorrect, or it'll be underlined in whatever program I'm using. But for the most part, I don't worry too much about it.
Okay. So I am not. So I'll tell my listeners what I do. The 2 things that I do is I actually find Grammarly to be, with a grain of salt. Grammarly does catch all the typos, and it also catches some weird sentence structure things. And so I actually find Grammarly to be quite helpful in that way. So I always run every story by Grammarly. And honestly, I feel like some of the stories I get to edit, if somebody had just run it through Grammarly for 2 minutes, it would have saved me, a half an hour of editing, because it's just, a lot of passive voice kind of stuff that can just be fixed. The other thing that I do is sometimes after I read a story, I read it out loud. After I've written a story, I'll read it out loud kind of quietly, because when you read something out loud, somehow it forces your brain to actually focus on each word. Because a lot of times when you read, you kind of skip over words, and that's where you kind of skip misspellings. And, your brain will, have you ever seen that experiment where like this is the sentence that's completely not a real sentence, but you read it as a real sentence because your brain is filling in the words for you. And I think you do that sometimes when you're copy editing by reading instead of reading it out loud. Reading out loud forces you to actually identify each word. And also it gives you a sense of the rhythm of the sentence. Like if you're repeating a structure too often, it sounds funny. So I do that all the time. Certainly when I'm writing for podcasting, I read it out loud because I want to understand what it would be like when somebody speaks these words, which is very different than when somebody reads words.
So. Yeah, and connected to that, there's something I've been thinking about for the last couple of years. There was a New York Times opinion piece called "I Didn't Write This Column, I Spoke It," and it was by a writer named Farhad Manjoo, and it's about how he stopped writing longhand and started just talking into his AirPods and having it recorded while he was walking. And he said it totally changed the way that he wrote. And I thought that was cool, in the same way that you're talking about how talking it out loud makes a difference in how you're writing and makes it clear. He talked about how just developing sentences, and while he was walking and recording it through his AirPods and then having it transcribed automatically, like changed. It was a radical reinvention.
I love that. Yeah, I've heard a lot about
the screenless internet.
I've heard a lot about this, and I have been doing this on my walks lately. When I do it a lot with my ideas, I'm like, okay, and I just turn on the recorder and be like, okay, here's an idea. But I love the idea. I think there's a guy, the scribe technique, right? I don't know if you're familiar with that, right? I've had him on my show. I can't think of his name, but he does something called the scribe technique. So it's that technique of speaking your book or speaking your article. That's good when you're doing like a personal essay. A little harder when you need to incorporate quotes and there's a lot of factual information and stuff like that. That's a little trickier to do because it's not all there in your head. But I do like that idea for a certain type of writing. Is there anything? What do you do about? Let me see. Do you have a routine? I remember one time you told me something that was really interesting in the last interview we did, that you always write from a different room every day. You always change your locale. Do you still do that?
I mean, it was harder during the pandemic because but
you don't have that many rooms.
Exactly. Right. But I do try to shift it. I try to move around, and I don't like a routine, but have stuff to do. I don't like to work after 4 o'clock. I don't like to work before 8 o'clock. So I get my stuff done during the day. I keep the rest of my life open for the rest of my life.
When do you find time to do exercise, healthy stuff?
At 4 o'clock.
That's your 4 o'clock thing?
Yeah.
And you're just done. You're just shut down at 4 o'clock. Not shut down. I mean, but you pretty much, you don't even like answer emails and.
I mean, at night I will, but I try not to. I really don't like getting emails at night. I don't like getting stressful emails at night. I don't like getting stressful emails on the weekend. So I'm conscious about not sending them.
Oh, that's smart. I wish I didn't have to answer my stressful emails at all times of the day.
Because it's rattling. It could be rattling to get an email on Friday at 7:30. You're just kind of shutting down, and someone's like, "Okay, we finally got this ready."
Yeah,
it can be annoying.
So you just don't. And if those come in, and I'm just sure those still come in, even though you really work for yourself, and it's not like you're working for some crazy boss,
right?
Which has always been a great thing about your career. Do you still just basically say this can wait?
Yeah, and I think something shifted this year during the pandemic, which is like, there are bigger things happening in the world than somebody needing this right now. And so maybe they're getting it to you, but like something shifted in my priorities this year where I really felt like, you know what, things can wait. This is not the most important thing in the world. And so I don't know. I do feel a little bit more of perspective after this year.
Do you have any other tools you use? So you mentioned you use Siri, hour and 40 minutes, or you use the Pomodoro technique, which they have a website, but they also have an app. Are there any kind of like tools that you use, digital tools that you use to help you?
I use Notes just to, the Notes app as a very simple place to put things where I want to find them. I use Google Docs just to have things where I want to find them.
Do you write in Microsoft Word at all anymore?
I do.
Okay. Yeah. But you put it in Google Docs ultimately.
I save to the cloud. I save it to the cloud so that it doesn't disappear. A few other hacks that come to mind. So on Zoom, turn off self-view so you're not distracted by looking at yourself or thinking about yourself, and you can focus on the other person. That's something it took me like 8 months of coronavirus to figure out.
I'm looking at myself right now and being like, how the hell do I turn myself off? Let me look at my video setting here. Turn off self-view. You want the other person to be able to see you, but you don't want to see yourself.
People will still see you, but
it's under video settings. It must be under video settings.
Right.
Okay. I like that. Turn off my video when joining a meeting. See myself as an active speaker. Oh, I don't know. Hide non-video. I'll figure out how to do this.
Yeah.
But that's a good one, because I go into gallery view, because right now, basically what I'm doing is I'm looking at you to my left and I'm not really paying attention to my image on the right. But I know that if I look over there, I'm going to be like, God, your hair looks really thin right now on the top.
I mean, there's actual research that Microsoft did on people looking at themselves, and it's exhausting. Like, people report being more exhausted when they have to stare at themselves in addition to looking at others. Like when you're just conscious of like, oh my God, my face looks so weird right now. So without that, it takes one factor out of doing this kind of interaction.
I like it. Any other tricks, the actual process of writing for you? I think you said to me you don't outline, right? Generally speaking?
I do not outline.
Do you recommend that your students outline, or is that just a personal choice that people have to make, one or the other?
I mean, it's a personal choice. You can't force an outline on me, and it makes me terrified if I have to write to an outline. I have an outline right here that has been forced on me that a company is making me do, and I'm like, I know that's supposed to make me feel solid, and that there are these rough narrative beats that I'm supposed to follow, but I don't know. I feel like caged by that.
I know. So what do you do with all your quotes? If you have a lot of data that you're going to need to put into a story, quotes, statistics, factual information, do you keep it like, how do you organize it so that when you write your story, you know which ones you're going to incorporate into the story?
Font size. So font size and yellow highlighting in Word or in Temi. So if something is a great quote, I just blow it up to like 18. And if it's really great, I'll put it in yellow and 18. So I just can go back and say like, yes. So I see it as so I'll go through a document and just highlight and make those quotes big.
So you'll read through, like you'll go through the document at two times the speed and then highlight the stuff that you think should be big.
I'm like, oh, this is great. And then I'll right before it, I'll say kicker if it feels like it could be the end of the story, or lead if it could be the lead of the story, or new section if it feels like it could be the new section. And then I could just search those words.
That's good. I'm going to try that. I think I have my own weird way of doing that, which is not the most efficient. Okay. Headlines. Do you write headlines anymore?
I do.
Have you noticed that headlines have sort of changed in the last few years? I feel like they really have. Now, it totally has to do with the fact that people are trying to get clicks. But what is your advice? I'm going to do a whole separate podcast on this, but what have you noticed has changed with headlines? And do you think it's important for writers to know how to write a good headline?
Yes. I mean, they need to be short. So you can't have long headlines, because just for SEO stuff, it's just, they need to be tight. They need to be active. They need to be in everyday language, and they need to be prescriptive if they can. So why Joe Biden's dog is the happiest pup on Pennsylvania Avenue. I don't know. I don't know why.
Yeah, but that, that headline is interesting because you're not telling them in the headline. That's one thing I've learned from Entrepreneur, for the ones that do well, that if you leave a little bit of mystery in the headline, that you have to actually read the story to find out. Mm-hmm. That is an effective technique. I mean, so a lot of times I think people want to give it away in the headline, like, Joe Biden's dog bit a man, instead of like why Joe Biden's dog is in the doghouse.
Yeah. I mean, it was interesting. We at UPOD, we have these editors who get so many emails, like these opinion editors at the New York Times, who get 1,000 emails a week from people pitching them. And I asked them, like, what are the ones that stand out? And they said, it's really about the subject line, where, like, remember when Joe Biden, he tripped over his dog and he had to wear that boot right in the beginning of, like, right before he became president or whatever. And so we were coming up with headlines and with subject lines, and we came up with one that said, I'm the dog that Joe Biden tripped over. Here's my story. Okay, so she was like, I would open that email. Like, if I got some version of that email, I would open it. You want to be captivated. You want to be really enticed. You want there to be energy and a story behind it, and you want it to be tight.
Yeah, I love that. That's a great idea. What about if you're trying to get an expert to talk to you, and you're contacting them through email? Do you have a certain subject line that you tend to use?
I do this weird thing with subject lines, which is a hack that I do, which is 3, like an ellipses. So it's 3 dots in the beginning, 3 dots at the end, and it says interview request / then I'll have in 2 words the subject, like climate change, and then I have a / and then it says, would you, could you? That's it.
That's it? And you always do that technique? You always have that thing?
I don't always say, would you, could you, but I often do. And it gives like a little bit of a Dr. Seuss, like, kind of playfulness, even if I'm talking about climate change with somebody who's at Harvard or whatever. And so I get responses. I don't know why. People open it. The 3 ellipses, like the 3 dots before and after, it stands out from other emails.
I'm going to try that when I request people for podcast interviews, for sure. That's a good one. I do tend to get a lot of responses from my pod. Now, it could just be because people love my podcast. I doubt that, but something I must be doing something right, but I've never really analyzed what it is that I do. But that's I love the ellipses idea. Anything that I have missed?
Let me look for a second. I'm just looking at some presentation stuff that I have.
There's one thing. Are you familiar with Text Expander? Text Expander is a program that somebody turned me on to. And this is more if you find yourself in a situation where you have to respond to a lot of emails with the same response every time, which is like if you're somebody who's requested a lot for interviews, or if you, yeah, and I don't know if this is appropriate for this particular interview, but just something that's really interesting. So what Text Expander does is you write that response and then you give it a code like P ampersand sign. And then every time you type in P ampersand sign into your email or into your messages, that message will just pop up. It just goes, put, it just goes, doot. And it's kind of a nice shorthand way to not have to respond the same way to people every single time. It kind of customizes responses for you. So I just thought that was something I wanted to offer. Text Expander. And this podcast is brought to you by Text Expander. Anything else that we missed, Mr. Hackman?
Yes. Let me just take a look through my list.
I just thought of it. Well, I'll let you read and then we can.
Well, one thing I have that I may have talked about last time is this idea that I call thumb slam. It's a ridiculously.
It bears repeating.
Okay. Yeah. So it's a goofy thing that I still do, and I actually do it almost every day, which is when you have a high stakes email, or when you have a pitch that you are sending out to a big editor, or when you have a proposal that you're sending to an agent, or if you have something that you've worked on for a long time that's scary, or you're asking for the amount of money that you deserve to be getting, you take your thumb when you're ready to send the email and you slam it against the send key, and that's called a thumb slam. So it feels like the energy with which you send something. So it's like, bam, thumb slam, go, do it, get that thing.
I like that. It gives you, right, because if you don't have, especially in the ages of COVID where you don't have somebody around to like high five, you just you basically give yourself a thumb slam. I like thumb slamming. What about, you're very good at coming up with story ideas. Now, I imagine a lot of times you're assigned stories at your level, which is kind of a nice thing about being at a higher level, is that people start assigning you things. You have to come up with story ideas. But for people who are earlier in their careers and coming up with story ideas, I'm curious, you've always been good at that. We talked about this a bit in our first interview, which I recommend that people listen to. But one of the things, I'm curious how you come up with some of your story ideas. Like, are you somebody that reads certain websites every day? Are there websites that like if you're reading the New York Times, that like pretty much the entire rest of the world is reading that as well. So why do that story? Tell me a little bit about your sources.
Well, one is just not writing things off that other people dismiss. So like Facebook ads and Instagram ads, the algorithms are built to send you things and to make you buy things, but often they're kind of playing to your interests. Mm-hmm. And so I listen to those, and I've gotten a lot of story ideas, not specifically from like, oh, there's a kind of cool table that I'm now going to write about, but you'll get ideas on entrepreneurs or trends that are happening. So just kind of paying attention to those things. Mm-hmm. As our friend Taffy says, notice what you're noticing. Yeah. And noting what you're noticing. So that's another thing that Tom Janot, the writer, came and talked to us at UPOD about. He just said, like, take notes as like in journals, even if it's one line a day, even if it's just like one line every day about what you're noticing. Or just keep a running list somewhere on your phone, like in a little pad of paper somewhere of the things you're seeing. And then you can go back and look at them, and you have a huge collection of ideas that might have seemed stupid at the time, but all those things always come back as I think like not dismissing ideas is a great way to have endless story ideas. People don't value their ideas enough.
And true. And do you make sure those ideas are all kind of in a file somewhere? You mentioned that you use notes. That's one thing, is you got to write down ideas when you have them, because otherwise you do forget them. There's just no way that your brain is not constructed to like store all these ideas to like, and I'm always convinced that I will be able to, oh yeah, this is a great idea. I don't need to deal with it. I'll come deal with it later. And then I forget to write it down, and then I forget the idea, and it drives me crazy.
Yep.
So write stuff down constantly. All right. I think this is, if this isn't useful information, and this is all free, if people want to find out more about you, and specifically about UPOD, which I think is a really terrific writing organization. You guys have great panel discussions. You have great experts come in. And honestly, I've used your website to find people to help me in my writing endeavors many times. I've hired people from UPOD. In fact, I just hired one person that I found off of your website. So talk to us about what UPOD is and how people can get more involved in UPOD.
Yeah, it's just upodacademy.com, and we're a semi-secret school for freelance superheroes. And you know, I've done during the pandemic, the interest in it, I think because people were at home, has grown more than ever. And we also have a program called the UPOD Scholars Program, where people who identify as Black, Indigenous, or people of color can attend for free. And so that has changed the way that these weekends work and operate. And it's been amazing. And so just
how has it changed? Just how has it changed it? Just,
more voices, more interesting perspectives, more interest from the speakers who want to connect with writers that they feel like we couldn't find Black writers before. And I'm like, look at the brilliance in this room. Look around the Zoom. So people have gotten incredible things have happened. Book deals, major placement in New York Times, Washington Post, all over the place, from people who have really never written before for places like that, and major book deals through agents at William Morris Endeavor and CAA and elsewhere. So just that's been an incredible part of it, and just talking to editors about what they want, because I feel like that's the greatest hack of all. If you want to be a writer, ask the people who are paying you what they want. Like, what do you need? What do you want more of? What do you never want to see again? What's your unicorn story? That's my favorite question. What's the unicorn story? I've gotten so many incredible assignments myself by asking editors, like, what's your unicorn story? The one that no one's been able to get that you've been able to find.
Yeah, I love that. You mentioned that before, and I think that's such a great. I've used that since we've spoken, and Good Housekeeping had one that I ended up doing, or at least tried to do. Yeah, warning about unicorn stories. There's a reason they haven't done them, because they're really hard to write.
But it gives you direction. It gives you direction, and it's a challenge.
Yeah, it's a challenge. It's an opportunity and a challenge. And actually, I ended up, was able to find the thing that they wanted, which was great. I want to be careful there, though, because I do know that sometimes when I get an email, because I'm editing a lot these days for Entrepreneur, and when I get an email saying, like, what kind of stories are you looking for, that kind of drives me crazy, because I feel like it means that they want me to do the work for them. That's why I have my text expander ready to go with the answer to Pat question about what are you looking for. Maybe read our website. Sorry, I'm being bitter, but I don't like when people haven't taken the time to read the website to understand what we might be looking for,
That's totally 100% right. And I think I'm talking about, like, when you get into a conversation with an editor, right, in about 25 minutes in, then you can say, listen, let me just ask you about, like, the kind of things you're getting. That is the most annoying thing that you're talking about. I totally agree. Do not do that. But do the other thing where if you can engage with somebody, really try to find out, like, what are they looking for that they're not getting? How can I be that person that's going to serve this cause?
Yeah. When you pitch, not you, but when your students pitch, is there a tech, and they might have to take a UPOD class to know that, but is there a standard? Well, I know you mentioned the subject line, very, very important. Certain amount of sentences per pitch. The first, is it the first paragraph of the story? What in general do you have them do, or is it different for each person you're pitching?
It's different for each. Just sound human. Sound like you're talking to a friend. Tell a story. Don't feel like. Try not to be so formal. Try to get someone excited. Show your interest, your enthusiasm, and just make it seem like, hey, so you may not have heard about this, but I think it'd be perfect. Here's the story. I was doing this thing. This popped up. I think it's a story I can tell in 1,500 words for this section. It's similar to the story that ran a month ago on this thing. But what I'd like to do is tell it by talking to these 3 sources. Any interest?
Yeah, a lot of detail.
That kind of, like, human, hey, I know what you do. I have a good idea. No one's told it. It's a story only I can tell, a soy cat, as I call it. And, like, can we do this? And then don't tell everything. Like, leave enough mystery for there to be more dialogue.
Right.
And then like, thumb slam and see what happens.
Brilliant. I'm going to thumb slam that. That's a thumb slam here. I'm putting my thumb up. We thumb it. David Hochman, thank you so much for this really, really helpful interview. I'm so happy that we did this episode.
Great. And we got in just in the right amount of time.
I figured I have a little internal clock in my head that's saying, okay, this is when we end this interview.